Howdy friends, Tyler Grant here at jamplay.com. Nice to see you here for week 8 of our country solo of the week. This is a fun little solo I call Rockin' in the Living Room, and we're going to get into a little bit of rock and roll flavor in our country playing. So, I've got my tube screamer on just a little bit. So if you have some type of distortion pedal, go ahead and switch it on. And let's get right to it. So I suppose I should probably play this for you once just so you get an idea of how it goes. Give you a chance to kind of get on the live stream here. So let me just play it for you once at sort of mid-tempo, and you'll hear how it sounds. Okay, we're rocking in the living room now. So we're going to start, Jason, if you go ahead and pull up the tablature there. And let's go ahead and get into it. So this is a 12-bar blues form, as you could hear on the rhythm track there. And with a kind of a straight up rock and rhythm, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So that's how I arrange the notation. And we're going to be working out of 2 main positions. One of them is open position. I mean, if you want to play rock and roll, just turn on your distortion pedal and do that. Sound like Link Ray or some of the early rock and roll guitarists who really loved playing out of that minor pentatonic shape. So we're going to be in that position for the first half of the solo, and the second half of the solo will be up the neck, 12th fret. Same position with a couple of twists in there, okay? So this is pretty straightforward, pretty easy to grasp. And we're going to start on this tonic note E, down an open position, okay? 2nd fret of the D string. And then we go into this lick where we play the open G, and then to the 1st fret. And that is a really common thing. If you can visualize your E major chord. You know, my dad used to strum acoustic guitar and do that little lick all the time. And it's the flatted 3rd resolving up to the major 3rd of the chord is all that is. So those are your first 3 notes, the E, open G, 1st fret, turn down a little bit while I'm talking, and then the open B, 3rd fret, open E. So that little lick all together goes, okay? And what that's doing is outlining an E7 chord. So we could get away with just playing minor pentatonic stuff, but I'm trying to add this little twist of sophistication that exists in country guitar where we don't really bypass the chord tones a lot. We tend to like to target the chord tones and get a little bit of that sort of major scale sophistication in there with our blues playing. So that's how it begins. And then you let that high E string ring for a beat, and then we descend the same thing this way, third finger, third fret of the B string, open B, second fret of the G string, open B string, and then open G, first fret, then land on the tonic note again. So that's a little lick that kind of works its way up, and then it works its way back down the same notes, pretty much. So let's try those first two measures here. Now count real slow. 1 and 2 and ready and go, and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Okay. So what happens next? We go up that exact same figure again. Okay. Then we get into this kind of stuff. Very simple lick, third finger on the third fret of the high E string, open, then the B string, same thing again. Okay? So those first four measures sound like this. So let's try that much really slow. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2. So I didn't write all the pick strokes in here, but I will just tell you to try to keep your pick strokes down, up, consistent with the consistent with the timing of the music. Okay, so it's down, up, 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 down, up. Okay, because once we get to tempo, that down up of the pick is going to be important. Okay, so moving right along, we just did this, and then the next measure, the second system of this notation, you continue that lick, but now you move that second finger to the second fret of the B string instead of playing the open B. So this is a clever way of going from an E chord to an A7 chord, because these notes outline that A7 chord shape, okay? And we keep that figure going for a couple measures. Play the open E string there. So why don't we just play those first two measures of the A chord just to get that little lick down. So these will be the first two measures of the second system, okay? 1 and 2 and ready and slow and... If you really want to drive your neighbors and your family crazy, just play that lick for a while. Really loud. It'll sound like Joe's Garage or something. So there we go, and then we're moving on to the next E chord, which is an open B string. That's how we resolve it, because that being a member of the E chord, the fifth of the E chord. And then we play the same lick that we started with. Okay. Then right after that, we do this little... So that's a slide from the third fret of the B string up to the fifth fret while you're playing the open E string with it. So you get that unison. And then we play those two notes. Okay? So we're almost through the first chorus of this 12-bar blues. So let's play what we have so far, all right? So from the top, really, really slow. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 2. Starting to make sense a little bit. We'll play this with the rhythm track in a minute at the slow tempo and it'll make even more sense to you. Now we have this little lick on the B7 chord, the 5th chord of the progression, which goes another little repetitive figure. So you can do this one of two ways, either your 1st and 2nd finger or your 3rd and 4th. Sorry, 1st and 2nd or 2nd and 3rd. I'm going to use my 1st and 2nd finger. Hammer on from the 3rd fret to the 4th fret. And then you play the open B string and you just repeat that. Then you slide down, whole step, and then open G. And now what do you think we're going to do? We're going to do this. Now this is kind of drawing on a lot of influence of early Sun Records era rock and roll, like 1950s era rock and roll, where that lick is king. Okay, so that's just a minor pentatonic scale descending. So I have a nice slow rhythm track here, and why don't we go ahead and play this. So we're halfway through the solo. The solo goes 2 times through the 12-bar blues progression. So we're 1 time through the 12-bar blues and halfway through the solo. So let us try this with the track at slow tempo. One, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we had a question pop up. Please do send in your questions. We'll take a couple breaks here to answer. Can this be played using all down strokes? I have a hard time being accurate when trying to use down up picking. Well, at this tempo it certainly can, but our sort of performance tempo, there's 3 different tempos here. At first I demonstrated it at the mid tempo of 65 beats per minute. We just played it at 45 beats per minute. Here's the faster tempo of 80. So just kind of imagine this for a moment. I'll play it for you. Now I can try that with downstrokes and see. I can play it with downstrokes. It's a little more difficult. Now the downstrokes are great for playing this type of early rock and roll, and this also relates to like country and bluegrass playing, like Bill Monroe on the mandolin would play this fast all downstroke kind of method, and that's totally fine. It's no excuse to get your alternate picking together though, so you should definitely work on your alternate picking, because there will be things that you cannot play with downstrokes alone. Okay, good question. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to the second half of this solo. And this is going to be, you'll see the double bar lines after that section we just finished, kind of midway through the third system. And those denote the end of the first half and separate it from the beginning of the second half. So here's the second half. And this is going to be a lick you might have played before, and it's this. So we've shifted up here to 12th position, and third finger plays the 14th fret of the B string, and your first finger will kind of do a partial bar to play the 12th fret of the B and high E strings, and you do this little bend whole step, then play both of those high notes in succession. Now I'm trying not to make any noise with this bend. But every now and then you'll hear me hit one of the other strings, and that's okay. It's rock and roll. A little bit of noise, a little bit of extraneous noise is okay. If I wasn't doing this and I was just bending the note, I could use my other fingers behind it to kind of help dampen those other strings from ringing. With this other finger occupied, it's a little more difficult. As you can see, I'm having trouble controlling that. Doing about 50%, you know, but that's okay. Like I said, it's rock and roll, and a little bit of string noise is totally fine. This is supposed to be kind of raucous and fun, and you don't want to worry too much about those little details. So you'll see that this lick is a repetitive figure that's 3 notes, and just like the one we did down here, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And those little figures sound really neat against a 4/4 rhythm, because it gives you this, what we call rhythmic counterpoint. And again, similar to certain elements of like bluegrass music, or you know, the music where this all evolved from, you know, West African drumming and dancing, where there's a lot of this 3 against 4 stuff. So that lives on in rock and roll music. Okay, so let's just play those first 2 measures of that section there on this high lick, like I just played. 1 and 2 and ready and slow and. Nothing to it. It's reminiscent of this lick. Just a little bit more controlled. Something you hear players from the 50s doing, from, you know, Chuck Berry to Scotty Moore, to James Burton, on into the 60s with players like Eric Clapton and Jimi Hendrix, who learned from that generation. So there you go, rock and roll lick number 1. Moving on, we're going to keep going with this kind of double stop thing. So that's our next lick. Same position, Still on the 1 chord, still on the E7 chord. Fourth finger plays the 15th fret of the B string, and third finger plays the 12th fret of the G string, and you do a whole step bend once, then you do a bend and a release. And I'm kind of pinching these. I'm using the pick and my M finger, my middle finger of the picking hand. And then you play your first finger on the 12th fret with that same note. Then you land on your tonic note there with your third finger. And then play these 2 notes again. And then... So that's just kind of the same thing, kind of working its way through a couple times. Okay. So let's try those 2 measures on their own. 1, 2, ready, slow. So, how about all 4 measures, those first 4 measures of the second half of the solo, starting with this. All those 4 measures in context, and those are the 4 measures of the E7 chord on our second round through the progression here. So here we go, real slow. 1 and 2 and ready and slow and... So, moving right along, we're going to get to this next lick, which is a similar, what we call a double stop lick. And like I said, this is kind of reminiscent of like 50s era rock and roll, where there's a lot of these double stop figures. A lot of this kind of... So we're going to do this one now. And that is the same fingering, but now we're on the B and the high E strings. So third finger there on the 14th fret of the B string, fourth finger on the 15th fret of the high E, and we do an ever so slight bend, not even a half step, just like, just to give it a little bit of swank, as I like to say. And then that note, 2 notes. So first finger on the 12th fret, fourth finger, and then first finger. So, and I'm still pinching those. You could do those with a downstroke, but I'm doing this a little bit more country style, where I want a little more separation of notes. So I'll go with a pinch, pick and M finger. And now this lick is you got to flatten your third finger across the 14th fret of the G and B strings and go. So those are the last 2 notes of the measure, but this lick in itself is important. You play the notes and then you bend up a half step twice without playing them again. It's easier when you're in tempo. Okay, but I might use one of these fingers behind it to help, you know, support that bend. So a little slower. Okay, and that sets us up for the next lick. So we're taking our time and kind of easing our way through this. So let's review this second half of the solo from that up to the point we just landed. Okay? Here we go. 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and... course, next measure will land on the tonic note. Okay. So yeah, let's just keep moving on. We're getting to the home stretch here. So we're gonna come up on this lick here. These were all A chord licks, by the way. And again, you can see those notes of the A7 chord, which we're targeting, even this one. So you're learning how to play over changes in a 12-bar blues here using, some rock and roll language with a country twist, right? So now we're back to the E7 chord. It's hot. Ooh, it's hot today in Colorado. Tell you what, I'm sweating. I feel like I'm in Tennessee for a minute. So here's that tonic note, E, on the 14th fret of the D string. And then we're going to play the same lick we played at the top of the solo. Not exactly the same lick, but the same notes. Remember that? We're going to have to come back and review that first half once we get this done. So now it goes... Same language, you can see that we're outlining an E7 chord with this lick. So here we go, 3rd finger, 14th fret, hammer on your 1st to the 2nd finger on the G string, and then 12th fret of the B string, 12th fret of the high E, and then down the scale, 4th finger, there on the 15th fret of the B string, 1st finger on the 12th fret, 3rd finger on the G string, back to that same note where your 1st finger was. Now you do the little hammer on from the 12th fret with your 1st finger to the 2nd finger, landing on that E note. So those two measures in context sound like... It's a good lick. Let's play that real slow, just that one lick, those 2 bars. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... Okay. So now, here's the big question. What do you do on the 5 chord? This is where a lot of rock and roll players and blues players might not have as much vocabulary to handle that 5 chord. Because the 5 chord, everything changes. This is your dominant chord, and you really actually have to get to some of those target notes of that chord. The 1 and the 4 chord are so similar, you can play similar material, similar licks over the 1 and the 4. By the time you get to the 5, you actually have to know some 5 chord licks. So I'm showing you the easiest 5 chord lick you can possibly play, and it's this one. Okay? So we're on the tonic note E, where we just landed. And we're going to have to do a pull bend because we're on that D string. You pull it toward, that end of the neck, toward the treble strings, and do a whole step bend. And then another whole step bend with a release. And then 1st finger. And then 3rd finger plays the 14th fret of the B string, which is your tonic note B. And then we do one more of these, just for safe measure. And it sounds like... So see how we're, when we do this lick on an E chord, this is the same lick on a B chord. And it is not deviating from your minor pentatonic pattern at all. If you were up an octave, you'd go. If you were in open position, you would go, same kind of thing. So this just shows you a nice way you can address the 5 chord without having to get into too much theory or too many note sort of ideas, So there you go, this lick. And then we will wrap up this whole solo by doing going back to open position, and we're anticipating the arrival of the 1 chord by going. That all happens while we're still on a B7 chord. How does that work? Let's see. It's because you can anticipate the arrival of a chord. You can play what we call ahead of the changes, and that is a really cool thing to do. So you anticipate the chord coming up and play a lick that relates to that chord. So here we are landing right on the B7 and playing this B7 lick. And while the B7 is still happening, we play an E chord lick that lands right on the downbeat of the E7. And the way time goes by, our ears perceive that as like flowing perfectly right into the change by anticipating it. So this is just a nice improvisational trick and a good thing to know. So that lick is just that same kind of thing we played early in the solo, open E, 3rd fret of the B string, working down our pentatonic scale, and then that little open G to the 1st fret, flatted 3rd to major 3rd, down to the tonic note E. And instead of going like we did on the first half, this time we're going to go. Have you ever played that before? This is one of those blues licks and rock and roll kind of licks that you should know. It's the same thing as, but we're just putting that low E an octave higher. So you can do a solo that starts like this. And you're basically playing the same thing over and over again, but it sounds really cool. Kind of like... So you see how, just by moving one note from a lower octave to a higher octave, you get a completely different lick. So there it is. And I'm giving it a little bit of a bend just for swank. Just for a little bit of attitude, a little bit of motion, you know? Okay, so there's the entire second half of the solo. And I'm sweating. I don't know where you live, and I don't know if you're sweating as much as I am, but it is hot in here. Question. I'll take a quick question and then we'll review this whole second half, okay? How far can you get away with anticipating a chord change? That's a good question. So how far can you get away with anticipating it? So I think you mean how far ahead of the chord change can you play? Well, you could play pretty far ahead of a chord change. We could, for instance, just play E licks over this whole thing, and they're eventually going to sound right because they're going to resolve to an E chord when the E chord rolls around. There's almost this idea of the one note solo, right? So there I was playing the same note, our tonic note E, over every root note of the chords. And it works. By the time you get to the 5 chord, it sounds like you're kind of being ignorant. But you know what I mean? That kind of thing, it totally works. So there's no definite rule to that. It's really up to your own sensibilities and your own ear telling you kind of what to do. But what I would recommend you do is download this rhythm track. You know, being a Jam Play member, you can download all the tracks and just kind of, you know, experiment with that. See how far ahead, for instance, you're on a 1 chord and the 4 chord's coming up. See if you can start some 4 chord licks, you know, a couple measures before the 4 chord and see how that sounds. And typically I don't go any further than, like, say, a measure ahead. But hey, man, this might be your style. You know, you could really, really stretch that concept out, you know, as far as your ear tells you to. But in this example, you know, I'm just doing this. That's an appropriate length in rock and roll. if you're listening to like bebop jazz and you're listening to Charlie Parker and Miles Davis and players like that, and they're playing fast bebop, that stuff goes by so fast, and these guys are so far ahead of the changes that it all seems to make sense to your ear. So it also has a little bit to do with the tempo. That's a really good question. I like that. Okay, so here we are on the second half of the solo. We're going to play the entire second half nice and slow here, and I'll just count you in. Here we go. 1 and 2 and ready and slow and okay, so while that's fresh in our minds right now, let's try that, just that.
Well, it looks like we lost Tyler's feed, everybody. I do apologize for that. I'm currently communicating with him, trying to get him back. I will give it a couple seconds here. He is typing back to me. Let's see here. He's showing it's still going on his end. Let me check all of our inputs. I'm getting it connecting. I'll be right back, you guys. Hopefully we can get him back shortly here. Okay, Tyler is in the process of restarting his feed, so we should hopefully get it back within 10-15 seconds or so.
That we are back on. Yeah, every now and then the signal goes out, so thanks for bearing with us. We got it back on. So we were going to play the second half of the solo with the rhythm track at the slow tempo. So starting on measure 13, which is halfway through the third system. Here we go. One, two, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... Cool. How did that feel? Okay, now I think it's time to go back and play the entire solo with that track at the same slow tempo, okay? Let's give that a go. From the top. 1, 2, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... This is a good chance to throw in those little... You do your little pinch harmonics if you want, you know. Your little ZZ Top kind of tricks, you know. You can throw those in anywhere. We're rocking in the living room. So put your own twist on this, you know. Play whatever kind of vibrato you feel like playing. Add whatever little extra pull-offs you want to. You can go like... You know, take that lick and make it your own. Do what you want to with it. So while this is fresh in our minds, let's just play through the whole thing one more time. Just to get it down a little bit better, and then we'll try it at the faster tempo after that. So here we go, same thing, the entire solo, rocking in the living room. Oh, 1, 2, oh, 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and... Fun. Okay. Any more questions? Please do send them in. Remember, all you Jam Play members can download the tablature notation and can also download these rhythm tracks. And the rhythm tracks go through this several times, you know, for 2 or 3 minutes each, so you have a chance to really stretch out while you're jamming on this. And there are some great deals right now for new members, and we're here kind of offering these free lessons while, you know, a lot of people aren't working right now. A lot of people are at home. So if you can swing it, it's well worth it to become a Jam Play member, and you have access to the entire site, all of these lessons on the archive, as well as these materials, which you can get that much more out of the lesson for. Okay? So here we go. We're going to go ahead and run through this at mid-tempo now. This is going to be 65 beats per minute, all right? 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Makes me want to put my guitar behind my head like T-Bone Walker. Okay, Rockin' in the Living Room. This is the kind of solo you might hear on something like, you know, like Alan Jackson's Mercury Blues and things like that. I believe Keith Urban played the guitar on that before he was a well-known country star. But there is a place for this style in country music. On through like the 80s and 90s, artists like Ricky Van Shelton, Ricky Skaggs, even Emmylou Harris with her hot band, you know, they were kind of the neo-traditionalists taking music back to the roots of country, which kind of involved the roots of rock and roll as well. And, you know, there's always been this pop crossover in the country world, and now we're at a point where there's players like, you know, Brad Paisley and a lot of these current, you know, Keith Urban, current country players who, they draw on a lot of like 80s and 90s pop, you know, but they always have this like rootsy rock and roll playing, you know, rootsy rock and roll foundation in their playing. So there's a place for this in country music, even though we're like really feeling we're in kind of the classic rock world here for a minute. Okay, so let's try that one more time, mid-tempo. Here we go. One, two, 1, 2, 3, 4. Cool. All right. So now I'm going to try this at the fast tempo. If you're down, go ahead and play along. If you're not quite there, you know, just listen, observe, and soak it in. But let's give it a shot, okay? Here we go. Fast tempo, Rockin' in the Living Room. This is 80 beats per minute. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. You ever do this one? All these little tricks, you know, when you're rocking out in nightclubs and bars and festivals for as many years as I have, you try to pick up a couple of moves, you know. Check out Keith Richards for some inspiration. Okay, do we have any more questions? We're going to just kind of keep going through this. I'll find some other things we can do. Okay, so a few things to note here. One of them is the use of each one of these licks, that you should just kind of take them and memorize them, you know, because you can use them in your own playing. I'm giving them to you, right? And And the other thing is to really work on the phrasing of your bends, the control of your open strings on the electric guitar. These are all just kind of general, things that we consider when we're practicing. And also wanted to tell you about the Classic Country Chops series on Jam Play, where I give you a total rundown on Telecaster style, including a lot of the technical stuff. Some questions came up about down and up strokes, hybrid picking, things like that. So these live lessons supplement all of the actual courses on Jam Play, so please do consider becoming a member if you are not already. So let's, just for fun here, I'm going to demonstrate how I might jam on this for you, because we still have a few minutes. But just for fun, why don't we go through the chord changes, okay? So this rhythm track you're hearing, there's a drum track, an acoustic guitar rhythm part, and a bass guitar. So the rhythm guitar is playing just a real simple, like, just through the basic changes. So why don't we do that one time? Let's go ahead and I'll put this back on mid-tempo, and let's strum through the chords, okay? We're talking about country solos. This is not a rhythm course, but you still got to know that rhythm pattern and know how to, and especially if you're playing in a band, you're going to need to be a good rhythm player. So let's go through that one time. That's my rhythm on the E chord, A7, E7, B7, okay, here we go. Let's go ahead and strum through this progression one time. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Lots of fun little rhythm riffs you can do, like. It's all fun stuff you can do with these rhythm tracks. Okay, to wrap up this lesson here, the last couple minutes, I'm going to go ahead and play through this one more time with the rhythm track, and then I'm just going to jam on it and kind of show you other ways you can use these ideas in your improvisation. Okay? Here we go with the track at performance tempo. Rockin' in the Living Room Now. So there you go, friends. Please do send in questions if you have them. Just reach out to us anytime you need us. We're here for you at jamplay.com. Look at the member deals and join us next week when we're going to be doing one more. Well, we have 2 more weeks of this with Country Solo of the Week. And on Tuesday, we have the regular classic Americana songs and tunes on acoustic guitar series. So it's been great being here working with you. Really grateful for Jamplay allowing us to work from home. And we do have some new courses coming out soon, so keep an eye out for that. A lot of exciting stuff happening at jamplay.com. So I'm Tyler Grant. Thank you for joining me. And thanks, Jason, there at Mission Control. And I will see you next week.